It is November 15th, 2023, day 40 of the war. It is 6:30 p.m. here in Israel, about 11:30 in the morning. Yeah, 11:30 in the morning on the Eastern Coast in the United States. Let's jump right into it and get to good news to start off. Israel has yesterday entered Hamas headquarters, the Hamas headquarters in the Gaza Strip. And you might have seen the pictures of the before and after when Hamas's leadership was meeting, and then when Israeli soldiers were holding up flags inside a very dusty room that clearly had been battle tested. So that those headquarters were taken over. All the Hamas members were killed, and then Israel found underneath the headquarters a massive tunnel network with tons of weapons and secret documents. Israel fought against many Hamas members to take this over. They took out the secret documents, found a lot of weapons, especially anti-tank missiles, which will now not be able to be used against Israeli tanks. So that saves lives. Israel then sealed the tunnel with what we discussed yesterday, the sponge bomb, which is dropped inside, and then a chemical reaction expands the sponge bomb to seal off the tunnel, and then Israel blew up about 2 hours ago, blew up the entire headquarters. So it's a massive building, and it collapses. The entire thing went up in an explosion. So that's good news. The Hamas headquarters are gone. That's a symbolic victory and a very practical victory. So those are gone as well. Another Hamas headquarters, which was cynically placed underneath a hospital. This is a point of controversy over the last couple of days, that Israel had surrounded the hospital, but then it became very clear to everybody but the most biased people that this hospital was being used by Hamas as headquarters for its fighters. It's addressed in international law, as we discussed yesterday, that when the enemy uses when it itself breaks international law and uses a school or a hospital for military purposes, the advancing army has the responsibility to announce that it's going to attack the headquarters, thereby giving the innocent people in the hospital time and awareness to flee. Israel gave plenty of time, fulfilled all its obligations under international law, and then went in for the attack. There were 5 members of Hamas that attacked Israel from outside the hospital. And that's all on video. Everybody could see the Hamas members shooting at Israeli soldiers, and then Israel took over the hospital, and America, before Israel had started the raid, said that it had its own independent intelligence outside of Israel that convinced America that hospital was being used for a dual purpose, one as a hospital and one as a Hamas headquarters. So it became abundantly clear that this hospital was being used by Hamas for military purposes, and Israel has taken over the hospital. This is going in this war. Israel's advancing in this war incredibly fast, and it is really remarkable. And this war might be over a lot quicker than we thought. One more advantage that Israel has now is that it has broken up Hamas's communications network. They're having trouble communicating with each other. An army cannot exist if its soldiers can't communicate with each other. So again, as we've been saying, the first stage of the war is going to be clearing out mass amounts of Hamas and as Palestinian terrorists. And then there will be small pockets of people that hide their guns and don't fight right away. And there'll always be these pockets of resistance until Israel is sure. The second stage will be until Israel sets some sort of system up where Israelis can feel secure that they will not be attacked by anybody in Gaza. Israel will be there setting up some sort of like a security corridor or whatever you want to call it, to make sure that nobody in Gaza, whether by rocket or by climbing over the fence, can attack Israelis or anybody in Israel, and Israel itself will be secure. So Israel will be there. During that time that Israel's there, it'll obviously face pockets of resistance, people shooting it at it, bombs being set up, but all of those things will be minor attacks compared to what Israel's doing now. So stage 1 is what Israel's doing now, clearing out and hunting major amounts of terrorists, then keeping a security corridor there to make sure that it can't attack Israel in the future, and then setting some sort of system up that Israel's comfortable with. I'm not talking about a new government, not a new rule, but something that provides Israelis with the confidence that they will be secure. So that will be set up next. And during that time, there'll be pockets of resistance and shootings and bombings and attacks, but nothing like what's happening now. So we might get to that second stage a lot faster than we ever thought. We still have the entire South Gaza to contend with, that we haven't gotten there. Another piece of good news is that President Biden told reporters yesterday that they might be getting close to a deal. Prime Minister Netanyahu said, "Don't get excited until the deal is done." So that means that what you can take from that is that there's clearly negotiations going on, but they're not finished yet. In other words, they're getting to a good enough point that President Biden feels comfortable talking about it, not to a far advanced enough point where Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to get anybody's hopes up. So, but the negotiations are clearly moving. Yeah, that's a very good thing. Okay, some bad news. A couple more soldiers have passed away. We're up to 366 soldiers have been killed since October 7th, and we have to keep in mind that we don't want their deaths and we don't want their murders to be wasteful and for nothing. That's what this war is about, making sure that future soldiers never have to contend with these threats, and especially Israelis. The United Nations Security Council, which is the security council that would be able to force Israel and has in the past to a ceasefire or to pause in fighting, is supposed to take up a vote in the next couple of days about pausing and forcing a pause in the fighting. Now, the way it can do that is because it can relay sanctions on a country that doesn't listen to it. The United Nations Security Council is a small council of 15 countries. 5 are permanent members, including the United States. 10 are on 2-year terms. So every 2 years, those 10 countries switch out and other countries come in. And the 5 permanent members have veto power, which means anything the United Nations Security Council agrees to, or resolution to do something, let's say pass sanctions, or that there should be a vote, that there should be a pause in fighting, it has to be those 5 countries have to unanimously agree. If one of them disagrees, then and what's called using its veto power on it, so then the resolution doesn't pass. So you need a majority of the 15 plus all 5 permanent members for sure have to be voting on it, have to vote for it. So what generally happens is there are it's very common for there to be anti-Israel resolutions at the United Nations Security Council. It's always the American ambassador to the United Nations. It's always their responsibility to pressure other countries not to vote against Israel and not to even have votes against Israel. To make it so clear beforehand that the vote would come out against it, that doesn't even pay to have the vote. If America wasn't doing that successfully, so then there would be votes every single day against Israel. The only reason why there aren't votes against Israel every single day is because the United States gets the message out. There's no point in having this vote. We're going to veto it. So why do this? Why embarrass the Security Council that it has no teeth, that it comes up with these votes and there's such division? Now, so it'll be interesting to see if they have the vote. If they have the vote, that's a diplomatic failure on the part of the State Department. So that just says what it says. But hopefully they'll be able to be strong enough to convince people not to vote, countries not to have the vote. If they do have the vote, then obviously the expectation is from our side, from those that care about Israel, that the United States would veto the resolution against Israel or forcing Israel to have a pause. Okay. The United Nations is also forcing Israel. Sorry, that's a mistake. The United Nations has requested of Israel to open up one of the border openings between Gaza and Israel, called the Kerem Shalom opening. Now, before October 7th, and the terrorist massacre that occurred, those border openings would open a couple hours a day to allow workers to come in and out. It also allowed aid to come in and out. Right, there was aid that would get shipped into the port at Ashdod and then brought to Gaza and allowed in once it was inspected. It would be allowed in. through those openings. Now, I think that if you ask most Israelis, they would never want those openings opened again, ever. I think the overwhelming opinion among Israelis would be shut this opening forever, and don't ever let anything in. The United Nations wants it open because they want more aid to be able to come in. I don't know if that's in Israel's interest. Right now, the only aid coming in is coming in through Egypt. So that's the thing. Okay, and moving on to analysis, the United States members of Congress met with Mahmoud Abbas in Ramah today, which is the capital of the Palestinian Authority. Palestinian Authority was set up under the Oslo Accords. It's the government of Palestine. Palestine's not a country. They think they're a country, but they're not. And there's no official designation of them as a country of the United Nations. They have what's called observer status, much like the Vatican, but they're not recognized as a state. Many countries on their own have recognized the Palestinian state, but there's no borders to a Palestinian state. The Palestinian Authority has somewhat limited control over some cities here in Yehuda v'Shamron. What's called Area A, which is an area that was designated under Oslo for control by Palestinians of Palestinians. There are no Jews under control of the Palestinians. So, for instance, I live in Area C here in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, which is area controlled by Israel. Jericho is a 10-minute drive from me, and that is Area A. That's under the Palestinian Authority. So they have their own elections. They have their own armed police force. They have everything there, and Jews are not allowed to go, or Israelis are not allowed to go into Jericho because it's not safe enough for them. There are big red signs that say it's a danger to your life to go into this city if you're an Israeli. So we don't. But that's so now. So Ramallah is the headquarters of the Palestinian Authority. Mahmoud Abbas is the head of the Palestinian Authority. He's the president of the Palestinian Authority, and the members of the United States Congress met with him today. And it's a shame that they meet with him. I got to say, it's a real shame, and it's a shame because they're legitimizing him, and he's a tyrant. He's just as bad to his people as Hamas. He's stolen billions of dollars from his people in foreign aid that should have gone to them that never make it to them, and he incentivizes terrorism by paying terrorists. The list goes on and on and on as to the evil that Mahmoud Abbas does. He refuses to negotiate with peace with Israel. So this is somebody that the United States of America should not be meeting with, somebody that they should be sidelining with, and like George Bush did with Yasser Arafat, who was the leader of the Palestinians before Mahmoud Abbas. The United States of America should turn to the Palestinians and say, when you get a leadership that actually wants to make peace and wants to help out, then we'll be willing to do that. But until then, no. Okay, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who is a real lightweight when it comes to foreign affairs, said that Israel should stop killing babies and children and women. And it's such a superficial, ridiculous take to say that it's like. Everybody understands that Israel is not aiming to kill children. Israel has no interest in killing Palestinian children or women. Everybody understands that Hamas embeds itself with its civilian population, thereby making it impossible for Israel to wage war without there being a high collateral damage rate. Anybody that understands how the world works understands that Israel has a responsibility after the Palestinians attacked Israel to go ahead and finish off the Palestinians. So if you just take a mathematical equation and say Israel must fight back, everybody agrees. The people that it's fighting, the terrorists, hide themselves among civilians. Okay, that's point number 2. And then moving on to point number 3. So therefore, how should Israel fight them? So now you either have one or two options. You could say Israel shouldn't fight them anymore. Now they should stop going after them because the civilian toll is too high. Or you should say that Israel should continue what it's doing, and the civilian toll is not on Israel's head, it's on Hamas's head, because they could easily end this in one day just by surrendering. So those are the options. What people like, superficial people like Trudeau, who don't think things through, merely criticize Israel, but don't offer a suggestion as to what Israel should do going forward. Because that would require deep thought and recognition of the fact that life isn't easy, and you can't just do things black and white and only get the bad guys. That's in the movies. So something like this from Justin Trudeau is incredibly irresponsible for him to say, and shows what kind of a person he is, what kind of a leader he is. And just a cute anecdote, just our friends over in Jordan, and there are newspapers, and their newspapers they don't have freedom of the press. They have a king who's a tyrant. King Abdullah II must have okayed this, or his people okayed it, but a Jordanian newspaper had an article in Hebrew, because everybody in Jordan reads Hebrew, talking about what's going to be with the day after the war for Israel, meaning they're all the day after Israel, as if Israel's going to lose this war. And Jordanians have serious problems. It's a weak country. It's mostly empty, and it's 75% Palestinians, and it's ruled by a king that has the support of 5% of its population. So it's an anachronism, and it's archaic, and it's primitive, and it's a loser country, and it needs better leadership, and it needs a democracy, and it should really be the Palestinian state, because it's built on the original Palestine, and it's full of Palestinians. So why wouldn't Jordan be a good idea for the Palestinian state? Because there's a king there, and we don't want to upset the king. I don't mind upsetting the king. Okay, that's enough for our update. Let's go to questions now. Okay, how much percent of Hamas territories did Israel take in battle? I don't know. It's good. It's a lot of percentage of the territories. Again, it's not a question of how much percent of Gaza did it take, because we're not trying to get Gaza, we're trying to get out of the Hamas controlled Gaza. So like empty fields don't matter to us. So the soldiers actually go down into the tunnels, or do they send cameras? And is it too risky, and is it worth risking our soldiers for? I don't know how they decide which tunnels they should go into and try to get stuff from them, and which tunnels they just drop bombs into. I don't know how they decide. I know they're also using gas, not like chemical illegal gas, like nerve gas or anything, but like gas that knocks people out. I know they also use that, but I don't know how they decide. It's obviously very dangerous for soldiers to go into tunnels, but these soldiers are also highly trained and they know what they're doing. Okay, how do you perceive the effectiveness of Israel's military strategies and advancements, such as the use of technologies like the sponge? Not like the person wrote Sponge Bob bomb. It's not the Sponge Bob bomb. It's just a sponge bomb destroying tunnels. Israel's technology is incredibly effective. You can see that with Iron Dome knocking rockets out of the sky, Patriot missiles knocking missiles out of the sky, Arrow 3 knocking out some of the most sophisticated missiles that Iran has provided to Hamas and the Houthis and to Hezbollah. So Israel's technology is working very, very well. Even though they are deploying Operation Sponge Bomb, not bomb, again, somebody else's, can't Hamas dig out of it? No, evidently you cannot dig out of the sponge. Once the sponge goes up, that's it. It seems like you can't. I'm curious what happens if a person's standing in the way of the sponge. I have a feeling that the person is swallowed up and suffocated by it. How much of the sponge, again, SpongeBob, this is very cute, do they use for the tunnels, since you mentioned they are so big? How do they get it in there? Is some sort of bomb, or is it a hose that they use? No, so it's a chemical reaction that then expands. So it's chemicals that expand. It's pretty cool. Okay, if they find tunnels under the main hospital in Gaza, how should they? And they did. How should Israel deal with that? Should they blow up the tunnels? So they don't. I don't know. They'll decide what the best way of dealing with it is. If the best way is with the SpongeBob bomb, or with explosives, or just leaving them there. I don't know. What do you think Bibi is doing to improve how he's going to be perceived as history is allowing? So I think that if Bibi wins this war, I know people think I'm crazy when I say this, but I really believe it's true. Again, it's a prediction, and I'm not any smarter than the next guy. But I do think that if he wins this war, and he wins it well, I think that you're going to see him continue his political career. I think that he'll always be held responsible for not protecting us, but I think that's something else that's going to come out. I have to figure out how to teach this properly and how to articulate it properly and put it into writing. But the massacre on October 7th, we're slowly learning, was supposed to be much worse. And the fact that the IDF kept it to a much lower level is actually somewhat miraculous and a great accomplishment. So I know we're solely focused on the fact that our perfect record of invincibility and nobody coming over the fence and so many people dying is somewhat depressing to us. But I think that history is going to prove that it was actually an amazing response time by Israel to stop something that could have been much worse. Okay. Where were the tunnels that Israeli soldiers destroyed during their operation filled with traps set by Gaza? I assume that many Palestinians set up traps. The terrorists set up traps. Okay. Also, how did Israelis come up with the use of the sponge bomb device that released chemicals instead of explosives? I don't know how they came up with it. They're really smart people that work for Israel, and they come up with it, and then they also make a lot of money selling this to other countries. I still don't get how the sponge bombs work. Does it harm the terrorists or just take up space in tunnels? I think it just takes up space, but I imagine if there are terrorists there, it's not pleasant. If I imagine it takes up a lot of oxygen when it does this. So if you're in the way, I imagine that you will get be suffocated and killed. But I don't know for sure. It could be said that the war for Israel will be finished soon due to the superior military and weapons. How can Israel also win in the media and social media? Israel can't win in the media and social media, though a lot of people are saying that we're actually doing a pretty good job. I don't know. I don't know how you judge if we're doing a good job or not. I feel like as Jews, we're always going to feel like we're not doing a good job. But sometimes we got to give ourselves a pat on the back, especially the IDF spokesman's office, doing a wonderful job. Why do you think the U.S. suggests that Palestine should keep the land after Hamas is gone? They should know that this cycle of terrorism will continue happening as long as Palestine is in charge of their land. I think that America is somewhat hooked on the idea of, since every people deserve their own land and their own freedom, they should be free, and that Palestinians should have their own state. So, but I think that they're not thinking through, if the Palestinians get their own state, so then it'll become a terrorist state. I don't think that I think that their belief in the goodness of all people tells them that no, we should, and they use words like the latest one that they're using is rejuvenated state, meaning that it won't be the same state, but we know it will be. So that's the idea. How has the international community responded to Israel's use of innovative strategies in addressing the tunnel threat in Gaza? So the international community, pretty sure, is going to want to use these technologies. I think the United States should use this. Supposedly there are tunnels built to smuggle drugs and people from the Mexican border to the United States, and this would be a very good use of that as well. Okay. With the hostages at the end of her pregnancy, will Israel do a deal to get her free and her baby so they can both be healthy? I think if Israel can do deals that make sense for Israel's national security, doesn't put anybody at risk, they'll do a deal whether the person's pregnant or not. What are Israel's military plans to do with the weapons they recover from Hamas? I think we usually destroy the weapons that we use from Hamas. It could be that they use it for training. Used to be we used the weapons of our enemies. In 1967, 1963, we had what were called Russian divisions. There were divisions of Israeli soldiers using Russian weapons that they had confiscated from the Egyptians in previous wars. Okay, we don't need to do that anymore. Are the soldiers being risked by going into tunnels blind, or do they first test with camera and drones and then go in? I don't think they're dumb enough to go in. There's a lot of operations that are done, and a lot of practice and a lot of drills to make sure that they're not walking into a tunnel blindly. I think there's there's drones that they use that are on wheels, not flying drones, but like unmanned vehicles that they use. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Has Israel been able to obtain any information about Avira Mengistu, the Israeli prisoner being held in Gaza before October 7th? Do we know if he's being kept with the other hostages? Nobody knows. Look, we don't know if anybody knows. If anybody does know, they're not going to say anything until he's free. So, and especially we don't know where the other hostages are being kept. So we don't know anything yet. And again, if Israel did know it, they wouldn't announce it until all the hostages, including Hadar Golden's body and other bodies that Hamas is holding, Israel's not going to say anything about it until it's able to recover them. Is China playing any sort of role in the negotiations? I don't think so. I haven't heard about any role that China's playing. How does Israel approach the challenge of ensuring the safety of Palestinian civilians during military operations? Israel had spent 2.5 weeks warning Palestinian civilians that they should move south. Those that didn't heed the lesson, Israel helped them move south. So they tried that. and created a safe corridor for them to move down. So Israel's really doing everything it can, but civilians always do get caught, especially when Palestinian terrorists embed themselves with civilians, dress like civilians, and break every single rule of war that's designed to make sure that doesn't happen. How does Israel approach the challenge? Okay, do we think that the rally is going to make other individuals who are going against Israel to rethink their opinions and see what's actually going on? No, I think that people who are against Israel are hard to convince. I think that they don't know enough unless they start reading. But I don't think a rally is going to do it. I think what a rally does is it shows members of Congress that, a good segment of the population, not the Jews but the Christians that showed up, are behind Israel, and that if need be, the Israeli community, the pro-Israel community, can mobilize itself. That whole rally yesterday, with close to 300,000 people, was put together in less than a week. So imagine if things got really bad, what the American Jewish community could do. So that's the idea. Okay, that's the end of our video. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Shalom. Let's hope for safety, victory, and our hostages returned fully with a full shlema, and our soldiers returned safely and soundly. Shalom.